In February 1959, investigators found tire tracks leading straight off a cliff near the Dalles, Oregon. The tread pattern matched a cream and red 1954 Ford Country Squire station wagon, the Martin family's car. But when divers searched the water below, they found nothing. No car, no bodies, just tracks ending in midair. 2 months earlier, on December 7th, 1958, Kenneth and Barbara Martin left their northeast Portland home late that morning with their 3 daughters, Barbie, 14, Virginia, 13, and Susan, 11. They planned a short-day trip into the Columbia River Gorge to gather evergreen boughs for Christmas decorations. At 4 p.m., a gas station owner in Cascade Locks sold them 5 gallons of fuel and watched them head east. That was the last confirmed sighting. By midnight, neighbors noticed the house dark and empty. The search grew relentless. State police mapped grid after grid. Helicopters swept the canyons. Divers dragged the Columbia for weeks using grappling hooks and weighted lines. By spring, they covered 80 river miles and found nothing. No oil slicks, no debris, no proof a family of 5 had ever driven that road. Then on May 1st, a barge anchor caught on something heavy and snapped free. Days later, fishermen found 2 bodies downstream. They were Virginia and Susan Martin, recovered 30 miles apart. Drowning confirmed. But Kenneth, Barbara, and Barbie gone. And still no car. Investigators suspected the barge had jolted loose a submerged vehicle. But if the Ford was down there, why could no one find it? If the tire tracks marked where it went in, why was the water beneath them empty? For 67 years, that question haunted the gorge. Until 2024, when a diver exploring a section locals call the Pit found something buried 50 feet down in silt and stone. A cream and red station wagon, upside down. They found the tracks before the car, and when they found the car, they'd already found the bodies. For 3 weeks, search teams found nothing. Helicopters swept the Columbia River Gorge. Volunteer groups combed the shoreline. Divers dragged weighted lines through the deepest channels. Despite extensive efforts, investigators could not find a single piece of the Martins' 1954 Ford Country Squire. Then, days after the disappearance, a damaged handgun was recovered near Cascade Locks. Police traced the weapon to a burglary occurring the same weekend. 2 ex-convicts were arrested in the area. Both had criminal records. Both were present in the gorge on December 7th. Yet neither could be linked to the Martins. The gun remained an eerie coincidence, or evidence of something investigators couldn't prove. Years later, in 1961, a Camas resident wrote to the Oregon Journal stating they were parked in Cascade Locks on December 7th, 1958, heard screaming moments after seeing a vehicle proceed toward the locks, but found nothing upon investigation. The letter arrived too late to aid the active search, but deepened suspicions of foul play. 2 months later, Detective Walter Graven made a breakthrough. Tire tracks were found on a cliff near the Dalles, leading to the edge. Paint chips embedded in the rock matched the Martins' Ford. But the tracks suggested the car had been backed toward the cliff deliberately. Accidental crashes don't leave tracks like that. A geographic contradiction deepened the mystery. Multiple witnesses placed the Martins on the north bank of the Columbia at dusk, across the river in Washington. Yet the tire tracks were on the south side in Oregon. For the car to go over the cliff, the family would have had to cross back to Oregon after dark. Why? And if they did, who saw them? The evidence pointed to where the car went, but couldn't explain why anyone would go there. When tire tracks show a car was backed to a cliff deliberately, does that prove murder? Or could there be another explanation? On May 1st, 1959, nearly 5 months after the disappearance, a river drilling rig operating near Bonneville Dam snagged something heavy with its anchor. The cable went taut, straining under a weight the crew estimated at several thousand pounds. Then the anchor broke free. Whatever it had caught dropped back into the river. Days later, fishermen downstream discovered the body of 11-year-old Susan Martin near the dam. Within the week, Virginia Martin's body was found roughly 25 miles apart from Susan, near Camas, Washington. Both girls had drowned. Autopsies confirmed no trauma beyond what the river itself inflicted. Investigators theorized the drilling rig had jolted loose a submerged vehicle, releasing the bodies that had been trapped inside for months. The river carried them in opposite directions, creating a geographic paradox spanning more than 25 miles. If the car had entered the Columbia at the Dalles, why did the bodies appear so far apart? And why was the vehicle still missing? Kenneth, Barbara, and 14-year-old Barbie remained missing. Divers returned to the rig's coordinates with sonar equipment and grappling hooks, dragging the riverbed in expanding grids. They found nothing. The Columbia's currents are powerful, capable of moving a station wagon miles downstream, deep enough to bury it under silt and rock. Tire tracks at the Dalles still indicated where the car entered, but the vehicle itself remained elusive. Two investigative theories emerged. First, the car sank at the Dalles, and the current carried the bodies downstream to Bonneville. Second, the tire tracks were staged, and the actual crash site was near Bonneville. Both explanations have flaws. If the car sank at the Dalles, why wasn't it found? If the tracks were staged, who staged them? And why? Two bodies answer one question. They were in the river. Three bodies still missing asked another. Where's the car? If the Columbia River released two daughters but kept three family members, does that sound like nature or intervention? For 66 years, the Columbia River held its secret. Then in November 2024, diver Archer Mayo explored a section of the river near Cascade Locks, known as the Pit, a deep depression with dangerous currents. 50 feet down, buried nose first in sediment and rock, he found it, a cream and red 1954 Ford station wagon, upside down. Mayo immediately alerted authorities. Decades of mystery were about to collide with modern technology. On March 7, 2025, recovery crews extracted parts of the vehicle, the chassis, engine, and tires. After 67 years underwater, the metal was corroded but still recognizable. Forensic comparison confirmed the make, model, and color matched the Martin family's Ford Country Squire. The vehicle identification number, however, was lost to corrosion. Investigators were 99% certain, but absolute proof remained elusive. On March 24th, authorities suspended further recovery. The corrosion made extraction dangerous and unlikely to yield results. After nearly 7 decades of searching, the car had been found, but much of the evidence remained submerged. The decision frustrated historians and armchair sleuths alike. A discovery that promised closure instead deepened the mystery. Then in August 2025, Mayo returned to continue his independent investigation. Throughout the summer, he made dive after dive, excavating the submerged vehicle's interior. He recovered human remains, what he believed to be the bodies of Barbara, Kenneth, and Barbie. Personal effects emerged, items bearing the Martin family name and address, a camera, children's toys, even the remains of Barbara's shoes, their rubber soles intact after 67 years underwater. The river had finally released its evidence. But one question remained. What had caused the car to go over the cliff that December night? They'd searched for 66 years. When they finally found it, they discovered more evidence, but the central question remained. If you spent 67 years searching for answers, and finally found evidence, would you stop halfway because recovery was too difficult? Even with the 2025 discoveries, investigators remained divided on what happened December 7th, 1958. The first theory holds the Martins died in a tragic accident. Kenneth, unfamiliar with the narrow gorge roads and darkness, backed too close to the cliff edge while turning around. The car plunged into the Columbia River. The river's powerful currents carried the vehicle downstream, buried it in sediment, and dispersed the family's bodies across miles. The 67-year concealment was simply geography and time. The second theory suspect's murder. Multnomah County investigators noted the tire tracks showed deliberate backing motion, not an accidental skid. Witnesses placed the family on the north bank at dusk, yet the tracks were on the south bank, suggesting they crossed back to Oregon after dark. Why? In 1961, a Camas resident reported hearing screams near Cascade Locks that night, but found nothing. Days after the disappearance, police discovered a stolen handgun near the river and arrested 2 ex-convicts in the area. The connection was never proven, but never disproven. Detective Walter Graven spent years pursuing the foul play angle, convinced the evidence pointed to staging. The Hood River Sheriff's Office leaned toward accident, believing Kenneth simply backed into the river. Both had evidence supporting their positions. Both had gaps in their theories. When Archer Mayo found the car in 2024 after years of independent searching, many hoped forensic analysis would finally resolve the debate. But the vehicle's extreme corrosion meant definitive proof. Murder weapon, bullet evidence, clear trauma, remained elusive. As of 2025, the case remains officially unsolved. The Oregon State Crime Lab continues analyzing the August remains and personal effects. Author J.B. Fisher, who wrote Echo of Distant Water, notes that every piece of evidence supports multiple interpretations. The Martin family's disappearance may be Oregon's most studied cold case, and its most resistant to resolution. The evidence points everywhere, which means it points nowhere. If tire tracks suggest staging, but the location suggests accident, do you trust physical evidence or geographic logic? Kenneth and Barbara Martin's eldest son, Donald, was serving in the Navy in New York when his family vanished. He waited 7 years for probate to close before he could inherit what little remained. He moved to Hawaii, became a high school teacher, married, and had 3 children. Donald died in 2004 at age 73, 46 years after his family disappeared, never knowing their fate. He is buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, a human reminder of the family's long absence. The Hood River County Sheriff's Office suspended further recovery efforts in March 2025, citing extreme corrosion and the danger of retrieving the vehicle. They had found the car after 66 years and judged the remaining evidence too degraded to pursue. But independent diver Archer Mayo persevered. 5 months later, he recovered human remains and personal effects, evidence authorities had declared too difficult to recover. Mayo's persistence transformed official abandonment into renewed investigation, giving investigators new material to examine even decades after the disappearance. The Martin case illustrates a paradox. Tire tracks suggest deliberate staging. Geographic contradictions imply foul play. Witness accounts report screams. Yet the recovered vehicle shows no definitive trauma. Detective Graven suspected murder for decades, but the evidence never converged. Sometimes truth is not concealed. It fragments, scattering in every direction. The Columbia River didn't hide the Martins. It dispersed them across decades of investigation, leaving clues that contradict each other. On December 7, 1958, 5 ordinary people left Portland to gather Christmas greenery. Their story became extraordinary not because of who they were, but because the evidence, geography, witness accounts, and 67 years of pursuit left multiple narratives without a definitive answer. Their lives, discoveries, and the relentless search that span generations demonstrate that some mysteries don't vanish. They scatter. Mysteries don't always hide. Sometimes they scatter, leaving so many pieces that no one can assemble them into truth. Would you rather have no evidence and endless possibility, or contradictory evidence that can never be resolved?